So I didn't take the phone call because I didn't recognize the number, but when I called back, the voicemail said, "Hi, this is Mrs. So-and-so, and I'm the principal at your son's school, and I have him in my office." And I have to be honest, in raising 4 kids, my youngest of which turns 18 next week, this is the first time, actually 18 this week, 2 days. Wow, I'm getting old. But this is the first time in my life I've been called by the principal's office to go as a parent and rescue or defend or explain my children's behavior. There may have been one time, but I think it was just a parent-teacher meeting when my oldest one was talking too much in class, so they put her desk in the hallway. And that was when we stopped public schooling, and she was homeschooled from then on. But the idea that my son has had an infraction severe enough that he is now in the principal's office was a new experience for me. And then when she ran down the list of all the things that were the reasons for him being in the office, I thought, well, that's not the way it's supposed to be. And she listed off the punishments and what was going to happen to him. And then he and I spent the rest of the afternoon together, and I believe there was a little bit of fear in his heart of what might happen now that Dad knows what went wrong. And I have to be honest and tell you, I didn't have a strong father growing up. And in fact, after my stepdad died when I was 10, I didn't have a father figure in my life at all. And so those teenage years for me were pretty wild. I pretty much got away with just about anything. My mother worked 24/7, literally. Sometimes she would work that 24-hour shift and go to work on Monday, supposed to be home on Tuesday, and didn't come home till Thursday or Friday because the other person couldn't make it to work or whatever. And so there were some teenage years that I got away with a lot that I shouldn't have gotten away with. And there were a lot of those years that I deserved discipline that I didn't get. And sometimes that I got discipline that, in my opinion, as a teenager, was a little harsh. Now, why would I bring that up here on a leadership video? Well, it's real simple. I know that in life, we have this constant relationship between parents and children. And we normally, when we hear children, think young children, 10 to 12 years old or younger. When they become teenagers, there's a whole new level of battle that goes on between expressing will and independence and making decisions on my own and starting to do things my way that rises up. And then there's another transition at that 18th birthday that, at least in Western culture, we presume they're 18, they're adults, they have their driver's license by now, most of them. They are close to graduating from high school, most of them by now. They have jobs, they have relationships that we're not privy to or a part of. And as we see that process in their growing, we ask the question, at what point do we kind of let go? At what point do we let them just deal with the consequences that are coming their way? Because life has a way of meting out consequences. Now, sometimes there's still a testing of limits as teenagers. There's a pushback to see just how far I can get away with this. And sometimes it's just influence of another circle of friends. It's influence of another group of people. It's a new idea that seems harmless at first until all the facts come out. All of my kids have tested those boundaries. All of them. And even the little grandkids that run around the house now, they test those boundaries. The reaction is different. The way that I respond to an intentional wrong choice for an 18-year-old versus an intentional wrong choice for an 18-month-old is entirely different. Immediate consequences are different. Long-term consequences are different. Why? Well, because an 18-year-old can make mistakes that have life-lasting impact, and an 18-month-old generally doesn't. Now, there are things they could do like playing in the backyard and falling in the pool, or playing with something deadly like a sharp object, or the carbon detectors that are plugged into the wall outlets that my youngest grandson loves to pull out of the wall because he likes to hear them beep when you plug them back in. Those little decisions can seem insignificant but have significant consequences. Then there are those decisions that we look at and we go, I wouldn't have decided like that. As a grown-up, as a parent, as your parent, I don't like that choice. A nose ring, 14 earrings, 3 more tattoos, the paint job in the bedroom. All of those little things we look at and we go, wow, that's not the way I would have decided it. But at what point do we let go and say, I can't command you every moment of the rest of your life, nor can I consequence you every moment of the rest of your life. At some point, I'm going to have to let go and let you make decisions, even if I see that they're bad, I know that there are consequences, and your life is going to see the results of these decisions. I've got to let go and let you make that decision, and I've also got to let life bring those consequences so that you will learn. You know, there are certain things we can learn from the book. I had an uncle once tell me, a smart man learns from his own mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others. It's when we don't allow our children, the little bitty ones or the great big ones, to walk through that process of gathering the information, making a decision, good or bad, and either reaping the rewards for a good decision or paying the consequences for a bad decision. Helicopter parenting looks like hovering over them to make sure that everything works out exactly the way that you wanted it to. Now let me back up to a leadership standpoint outside of the parenting role and express to you a deep concern that I see in our society. It's not just helicopter parenting. We now have helicopter governments. We have governmental policies and ideas that are made so that we can create an equal outcome for everyone. Regardless of the decisions that are made by an individual, regardless of the circumstances that life brings for that individual, we're making laws and policies that make everyone respond the same way to that individual's circumstances, that individual's consequences, that individual's choices. Now, I'm not going to say in this particular lecture which ones of those are right and which ones of those are wrong. My mere observation is that we have a problem in parenting as a government. See, a parent who follows their toddler around through the house to make sure that their toddler, especially a toddler who's just getting familiar with that territory, doesn't mess with things, doesn't tinker with things that are easily broken, but stays interested and directed on their own toys that are made not to be easily broken, that if they do break them are easily replaceable, who doesn't allow their toddler to play with sharp objects or wander into the garage where there are heavy objects or anything like that. That's good parenting. But when that toddler is 9 and 10 years old, a simple instruction, because consequences have come before, a simple instruction, don't play in the garage. Unless you're doing something in the garage that you're supposed to be doing in the garage is not a place to play. For a 9 or 10-year-old, that should be the end of that conversation. Don't play in the garage. And then there should be consequences if they choose to follow their own choices rather than the instructions they're given. By the time they're 12 and 14 years old, there shouldn't even be a conversation about playing in the garage. They know at that point what a tool is and what that tool is for and what that tool does and the damage that it could do or the help that it could provide. And they should be allowed to execute ideas, to experiment, to learn, to know. They should also have enough sense to know, don't stick pennies in the wall outlets. 2-year-olds do that kind of stuff, 12-year-olds not so much. But if they're 22 and still sticking pennies in the outlet, it's because they've never consequenced. They've never learned along the way to pay the price for the decisions they made. John Maxwell's dad says it all the time. You're going to pay if you want to play. Now you can play now and pay later, or pay now and play later, but either way, you're going to pay. That may be if you want to go play basketball down the street with your friends, I need you to rake the yard first. Well, You choose to go play basketball now, those leaves aren't going anywhere. You may be back here at 9 o'clock at night when it's 18 degrees outside, bundled up like a snowman, raking leaves. But either way, you're going to rake leaves. You can do it now, you can do it later, but you're going to rake leaves. Those kinds of consequences, that reality of here's your instruction, here's the consequence if you don't follow the instruction, and then the judgment or the justice that follows through with that. Those have to be in place from the time a child is old enough to hear and know the word no or yes and please and thank you. It's adorable. My grandson he'll be 2 in February, and we'll take him out to a restaurant. And he gets a little irritated. It's funny. He gets a little irritated if he says thank you to the server and the server doesn't say you're welcome. In fact, sometimes he'll say it himself. And it's kind of funny because if you understand what's going on there, he's actually mocking them for not using proper grammar. Now, in his little mind, he doesn't understand all the psychological consequences behind that or why you would do it or anything like that. He just knows those two words go together. When one person says thank you, the other person says you're welcome. And so if the server comes and brings food to the table, and his mother and I had lunch together a while back, and we both said thank you, and he turned to the server and said thank you, and the server walked off. And he said thank you again, and then nothing. Server never replied. Well, a couple of weeks have gone by, and the other day he was here for Thanksgiving, and he said thank you, and nobody said you're welcome, and he said welcome. He knows those two words go together. Those are habits that we have to train into young people. When they're 20 and 25 and 35 years old, the decisions that they make started then. The consequences are going to be a little different. When you're walking through the grocery store and you bump into someone or walk too close and they say excuse me and you don't say excuse me back, these days that could turn into a fist fight. Those are pretty severe consequences for lacking manners, for not saying thank you, for not bothering to step aside when you open the door for someone. Those are really simple things, but our society seems to have lost grip on some of those really simple things, and as a result, we have a hovering government that parents like a helicopter parent. See, a helicopter parent following their toddler around, good idea. A helicopter parent following their 9 and 10-year-old around, it's starting to get a little old for that. A helicopter parent following their teenager around, bailing out every consequence, avoiding anything that their children have done wrong, that's a disaster waiting to happen. Because that's a young person who will never understand that every decision has consequences. And those consequences are mine to pay. You will pay now or you will pay later, but either way you're going to pay. And young people in their teens, when those consequences are generally not as significant, need to understand those consequences. They need to experience those consequences. So back to my dilemma, I have this principal who has my son in her office, and she says, this is what we've discovered and this is what we're going to do as a school. And I said, okay. And there was stunned silence for a moment on the other end. She said, okay. I said, yeah, sounds like fair justice to me. Sounds like exactly what he needs. She said, you know, most parents would be arguing with me. They'd be defending their child and making excuses and so on and so forth. And I said, if he was caught red-handed doing what you say he did, then there are consequences for the decision that he made. And the price to be paid is his, not mine. That's not my argument. Now, if we were talking about something more significant, I might be asking for some lenience given certain circumstances. She said, well, you know, this is the first time he's ever been in my office. And now that I've had a conversation with him, I'm stunned that he is in my office because he doesn't seem like the kind of kid to do this kind of thing. Honestly, there was some misunderstanding that took place and was kind of the seat behind it all. But all of the other parts of the discipline and all of the other parts of the problem, he owned them. They were his. It was a series of bad decisions and a series of bad consequences. Now, what is my role as a parent? And this really gets to the heart of our government's leadership role, of our parental leadership role, of our team leadership role. Within an organization, There are certain things that a leader has to do to protect the organization. There are certain things that a leader has to do, whether it's a church or it's a big company or it's a small family or it's a community if you're a government leader. Certain things that have to be put in place to protect everyone else if someone's decisions put people in harm's way. But then there are times when that leadership role is to step back and let natural consequences take their place. Not manipulated consequences, not ire built up, not frustration causing riots in the streets that's exacerbated by leadership, but consequences that come naturally. If you tend to park your car in front of someone else's house and block the mailbox, that someone else may get annoyed with you and throw trash on your car. They may park their cars too close to your car for it to be able to move. They may back into your car if it's across from their driveway. There are any number of things that could happen. But eventually what's going to happen is the post office is going to get mad that you're parking in front of the mailbox, and they're going to put a sticker on your car. And if you don't move it after that, they're going to have it towed and impounded. So the escalation of consequences come with a lack of responsibility for behavior. I think that's true at every level in life. If a toddler is told, don't touch that, it's hot. Younger toddlers might be moved physically from that space to someplace else. Don't get too close to the fireplace, it's hot. No, hot. No, hot. Easy instruction at that point. You move them away, they go back. You move them away, they go back. You move them away, you smack their hand, they go back. If they're not getting it, eventually you got to let them touch it. In a controlled way. You don't let them stick their face in the fireplace. But when they put their little finger out there and they get that little burn and then they start to scream and cry, they understand there are consequences for life. They've been properly instructed several times, don't do that. Why do you think human resources have policies that are written around this type of behavior is not acceptable here, and the first time you'll get a verbal warning from an employee, from a superior employee. The second time you're probably going to get a written warning from an employer. The third time you're going to get a pink slip and your box of goodies will be sitting on the front steps. That's the way life works through these consequences. That's a bad idea. Let's talk about it. That's a bad idea. Here's some consequences. That's a bad idea. Wow, your life is going to change now. And I think that reality is true at every level, from toddlers to teenagers to grown adults working in companies. At every level, there's a consequence for decisions that are made. Some of those consequences are not negative consequences. Some of them are good. You make a good decision, you benefit the company, you earn extra money. Those type of things can make your life a whole lot better. But there are consequences to every decision. Every decision, every choice has a consequence. There will be an outcome. Every action has a reaction. You follow me? Now let me dig in for a moment from the parental view. Because I know those parents who have written off their children, so to speak. Their teenagers or their 20-somethings have made mistakes and they're like, get out, I'm kicking you out of the house. I know of a young couple that were engaged to be married. They were from 2 different countries. My wife and I did their pre-marriage counseling, well, it's been almost 10 years ago. And his parents wrote him a legal binding letter signed by the administrator of his country that they were disowning him in name and deed. Disowning him. They legally wrote the letter and said, you're no longer my son. Because his decision to marry someone outside of their culture was too severe for them to tolerate. Now think about that for a minute. What level of mistake would it take for you to lose your American citizenship? That's a pretty big question. What level of mistake? What would you have to do wrong to lose your right to vote? What would you have to do wrong for your spouse to disown you or your parents to disown you? Because those are the kinds of consequences most people don't ever want to experience. Most people through the course of life will never experience anything like that. They'll never reach the point where parents or loved ones have disowned them because of their decisions. An affair might be a decision that would cause you to lose your family, your way of life, your income, depending on your profession. But a lot of consequences for that kind of decision. But when young people aren't taught that decisions are choices that come with consequences, then later in life they make decisions that are selfish without regard for the consequences to themselves or others. Governments led by people who've never had to pay the consequences do the same thing. And that's a challenge around the world. There are governments around the world where the leaders currently have never had to pay the consequences for the mistakes or their injustices or the things that they've done wrong to others. But again, I want to dig into the parent. I hope you're seeing this from a lot of different angles. From the toddler to the teenager, we all make decisions and we all make mistakes and we all have consequences that go along with those. You're going to pay. You may pay now, you may pay later, but you're going to pay. There will always be consequences for your choices. Now, as a parent, when I look at my nearly 18-year-old son and I look at the consequences that face him for the decisions that he made, it would be real easy to break out a belt. I've been known to spank my children in the past. It'd be real easy to take away his car keys or take away his phone or take away whatever else and put him on a restriction and lock him down into his room or whatever else. He does still live at home. Let me ask this question. Which one of those things is A, directly related to his behavior? Without knowing the details, you can't really answer that question, but the answer is none. None of those privileges in life had any direct relationship or bearing on the decision that he made that got him in trouble at school. So what consequences does dad bring or mom bring into that environment? Again, I don't have a whole lot of experience with that because I didn't have a dad to discipline me with that. But here's kind of what I saw in my own heart and mind. I saw a young man who was heartbroken at the consequences that the school was going to put on him, having never experienced that in his life. A lot of it was just his reputation. He's never been in public school until this year. And so being in that school, having played on the football team, the relationship that he built in classes, what people thought of him means a lot to him. In fact, when he walked into his suspension class for the first day of the week that he had to be there as the punishment for what he did wrong, the people in that class were classmates of his. And they looked at him and they're like, "You're in here? What did you do to get in here?" And the embarrassment of having to explain that, pretty significant for an 18-year-old, 17-year-old. It's pretty significant for anybody. But that's a tough reality. So what does dad do to make that any worse? I don't know that I needed to. What he did wasn't a criminal offense. What he did wasn't going to land him in jail if I didn't do something to stop it. It was a really stupid decision. It was a really bad idea. It's not something I condone by any stretch of the imagination. And I think I was pretty clear about that both before and after. But the consequences that met him at the door at school for an entire week, and then another day after the holidays, I believe got his attention. Now, only time will tell if that has curbed his decisions and changed the way he thinks about what led him to that consequence. As a parent, my role is changing in the lives of my children. From a dictatorial, commander, tyrant type of a role to a support role. As my children become adults, their consequences get bigger, their opportunities get bigger, and I can't live their life for them. I can't be with them every moment. I can't follow my teenage sons out into the marketplace where they'll either get or not get a job based on their attitude. I can't go to work for them every day and make sure that they don't say or do something stupid at work that starts a fight, either with another employee or a customer. I can't do that. All I can do is hope that the information, the knowledge, the reputation, the attitude that I've instilled in them to this point stays with them. And in some situations, I can't undo the circumstances for the decisions that they make. The price is theirs to pay. Sometimes those decisions, like I've told my boys, I pay for your car insurance right now. Get a speeding ticket and see what happens. Because I'm not paying for your speeding ticket. You get a speeding ticket, you get your own insurance. By the way, the keys go with insurance. So if you don't have insurance in my name and you can't get insurance in your name, the car is mine because it's in my name. And you're not driving a car in my name with no insurance. See, those consequences start to stack up really fast, which means you better be paying close attention to how you drive and where you drive and how recklessly you drive and how dangerously you drive, because one ticket gets you off my insurance. One. Just one. That's an immediate severe reaction. But would I disown them? No. Would I throw them out of my house? No. Would I tell them I don't know you anymore? No. They might feel like it. They might feel like it really quick when they don't have any way to get to their friends or their girlfriends or their jobs. In Luke chapter 15, verse 11, I want to close with this. Maybe you know the story of the prodigal son who went to his dad and said, look, Dad, I want my inheritance now. I want to go do my thing. And so he took whatever money had been set aside for him as the youngest son, packed his bags, and went off and lived a lavish life. Burned through Daddy's money in a heartbeat. Maybe you saw this on Facebook this last week. There was an Aston Martin in White Rock Lake, which is in downtown Dallas. It's near Turtle Creek in a very wealthy area, pocket of the Dallas-Fort Worth market. And an Aston Martin is not a cheap car. But it was a just barely over teenager driver horsing around, ended up with that car in the lake. How does Dad respond to a $250,000 car or more in the lake? This prodigal son took Dad's wealth, took everything that Dad had earmarked before he even died, took everything he had earmarked for this youngest son, took the money and went out and burned it all. Burned through all of it, wasted all of it, had nothing left to show. Nothing left. It's not like he invested in a small company. He wasted all of it. To the extent, in fact, that it says he found himself in the pig pen slopping food for the pigs. And he thought to himself, you know those people that work for my dad's servants have it better off than I do here slopping pigs. Maybe, instead of going back as a son, I can go back as a servant and work for my dad, because I'd be better treated working for my dad than I am where I'm at now. My life would be better if I was a servant there than being here. But I want you to notice something about the Father. It says, I'm going back to my father. I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against God and I've sinned before you, and I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me as a hired hand. He got right up and went home to his father. When he was still a long way off, the father saw him. His heart pounding, he ran out, embraced him, and kissed him. The son started his speech. Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. But the father wasn't listening. He was calling the servants. Quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then get a grain-fed heifer and roast it. We're going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. My son is here, given up for dead, but now alive, given up for lost, and now he's found. And they began to have a wonderful time. The one thing that I've noticed as a believer in Christ and a follower of God is that no matter how many times my life has had horrible consequences because I've made stupid decisions, decisions that impacted my life, decisions that hurt other people's lives, my Father has never turned his back on me. My Heavenly Father has never once left me, has never said, I'm done with you. He's never written me a letter to say I disown you. And for all the fathering that I didn't experience as a young man, this is the fathering that means the most to me. The way the Father in heaven treats me, that's my model. That's what I need to live up to. And when I hear this story about a young man who took all of his dad's wealth, everything that was precious to his dad and squandered it, destroyed it, gave it away, wasted it. His father didn't disown him. His father didn't turn his back on him. In fact, when he came home, his father rejoiced not in all the mistakes that he made, but that he came home. I remember sitting on a swing contemplating suicide because of mistakes that I'd made. And I thought to myself, there's no one who cares if I'm here or not. Everyone whose life I have touched, I've made a mess of. And I think this world would be a better place without me. As that conversation was going over and over in my head, I was reminded of a father who never looks at his children and says, I can't believe you fell down. But instead looks at his children and said, I'm glad you tried to walk in the first place. Are my children going to make mistakes? Probably so. Are they going to do things that if I were making that choice, I would have made a different one? Probably so. Are my grandchildren? Probably so. But there will never be a point of the mistakes that they make that I won't take 3 immediate actions. Number 1, allow them to experience consequences while those consequences are small. Number 2, love them no matter what. I will always be there no matter how bad those mistakes are or how many people they hurt. They will always be my child. And number 3, I will do all I can to help restore them to where their life was meant to be before that decision, before that mistake. I believe that's what Transforming Grace and Redemption are about. And I believe that we as parents, we as leaders and employers, we as government leaders have a responsibility to allow people to consequence, to be consistently there for them no matter what, and to help restore their thought processes, their behavioral processes, and their lives to the best that they can be. This has been a long message today, but it's really for 2 audiences. For my Tell It Like It Is TV audience, for the leaders that are around the world that are watching this program, and also for parenting teenagers online. In alliance with Dr. Marion Poby and Parenting Teenagers Online, this video will be on their blog and on their Facebook page and shared around the world to their global audience, which is an entirely different audience than mine. I love having an opportunity to have alliances and relationships like that. And if you feel like any of the videos that I've shared here on Tell It Like It Is TV would be powerful for your audience, please reach out to me. I'll do everything I can to make them available or even create one for you. In the meantime, be a consistent parent. I want you to know that God loves you no matter what mistakes you've made. He is standing behind you regardless of the consequences that you currently face. And He is a consistent, steady, trustworthy Father every time. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.